Welcome to episode 22 of the Rescued by Dragons podcast, Tales of the Brunch Club, a fantasy fiction podcast inspired by a weekly homebrew Dungeons & Dragons campaign. My name is Dominic White, and I invite you to picture yourself in a cozy, torchlit tavern, ale in hand, gathered around a table with other listeners, waiting to hear the next chapter in the tale of the Brunch Club. But first, a quick recap of our previous episode. Diesa introduced the rest of the Brunch Club to the seedy underbelly of Elnor. They discovered the location of the city's black market, where they stocked up on health potions and scrolls of Find Familiar to resurrect Pip with. They embarked a second time to collect the bounty on the hill giants. During the night, they were attacked by 3 owl bears, one of which tried to drag Salus away. Salus was able to escape, and the Brunch Club were able to kill the owl bears with the help of an unknown ally, assisting them with accurate crossbow shots from an unseen location. And now, episode 22, Warning Shots. The sky was beginning to brighten with the approach of morning, but it was still dark. Drusilla cast 4 orbs of light around the camp. She made them circle outwards, illuminating the area around them, as well as the 3 dead owlbear carcasses. Vorjan took a deep breath so he could shout something to the unseen stranger or strangers who assisted them in their fight against the owlbears. But he dropped to a knee and winced in pain. He coughed blood into his mouth and spit it on the ground. The paladin had not fully healed himself after the battering he took from 2 of the owlbears. He murmured a prayer to himself, laid his hands on his chest and abdomen, and felt the pain in his chest and back disappear. He stood up again, inhaled successfully, and shouted into the early morning air. "Thank you for assistance! Please show yourself!" There was no reply. Drusilla guided her dancing lights past small hills, boulders, the edge of the woods, and anywhere else someone could hide. They saw no sign of anyone. They dragged the owlbear corpses away from the camp, then rested for another hour while they waited for the sun to fully rise. In the bright light of morning, they searched again for their mysterious benefactors, but without success. Elora looked at Pernold's map that marked the rough spot of the hill giant's last known location, and guided them toward it. Vorjan and Diesa followed behind her a while Salus and Drusilla followed behind them. After noon, Diesa stopped and pointed toward a log a few yards away. "I saw something duck in there," she said to Vorjan. "It looked shiny." "Elora, can you shoot that log, please?" Vorjan asked. Elora shrugged and said, "Sure, why?" "To be safe," Vorjan answered. The ranger shot her phoenix arrow at the log. It pierced it easily, going clean through the other side before magically reappearing in her quiver. "What's going on?" Salus asked. "Diesa saw something in log," said Vorjan. "Can you fire magic missile on one side of log? Hopefully that will scare whatever is in there out the other side." Salus did as Vorjan asked, but nothing emerged. Vorjan walked up to the log and swung at it with Eclipse. The rotted log disintegrated into powder when he struck it. In the middle of the dusty pile lay a fist-sized silver bag with a segment of gold chain hanging out from the loosely tied top. "What in the god's name are you doing?" Diesa asked Vorjan as they walked over to him. "You said you saw something shiny duck in log. Just wanted to be safe, make sure there were not more snakes," Vorjan explained. Diesa sighed. "I said stuck, not duck, you moron." The dwarf took the bag from him and emptied it into her hand. At the end of the long gold chain hung a large, exquisitely cut, star-shaped ruby. Salus whistled. "That's not something you find every day." "What's it doing out here?" Elora asked. "It must have been stolen and hidden away," Drusilla supposed. "I wouldn't risk leaving a necklace like that in the woods if I owned one, even if I was trying to hide it from someone." "So we should take it then," said Salus. "Why don't we ask Mr. Good and Lawful over there?" Diesa said, without any attempt to hide her sarcasm while gesturing at the paladin. "There is nothing wrong with doing right thing," said Vorjan, without any attempt to hide his self-righteousness. "I think Drusilla is right. Jewelry must be stolen. We should take it and try to find its rightful owner." The Dragonborn held out his hand, palm up, in front of the dwarf. We'll call that Plan A, Diesa said as she dropped the necklace and bag into Vorjan's palm. He placed it in the bag of coaling. Since they had stopped anyway, they decided to eat lunch, then continue on their way. About 3 hours later, Elora stopped and looked at the map again. They were still on relatively flat grassland, but they could see foothills and rocky mesas in the distance. We're getting close to its territory, Elora said. We should camp here tonight. No fire. They ate cold rations and discussed their strategy for taking down 2 hill giants. I recommend not getting hit when they throw boulder at you, Vorjan suggested, recalling their earlier encounter with a hill giant. If we can keep them at a distance, we should be okay, said Drusilla. You're the soldier, Vorjan, Salas pointed out. What do we do? The paladin thought for a moment, recalling the tactical training he received during his time with the Silver Flame. Drusilla is right again, he said. Better to keep them at distance. When we are in range, the 4 of you should shoot everything you have at largest one. Hopefully you kill it quickly before second giant reaches us. What if it reaches us before we kill the first one? Diesa asked. Then I will engage it, answered Vorjan. The 4 of you should run in different directions, so it can't take you all out with one blow. What if it takes you out with one blow? Drusilla asked. You 4 killing it before it can do that is, as Diesa says, Plan A. They agreed on the plan and decided getting to sleep early was a good idea. Without a fire, the women who were not on watch huddled together for extra warmth. Silver Dragonborns were not affected by the cold, so Vorjan required no extra protection against the chilly night. He said his nightly prayers to the Silver Flame and to Bahamut before drifting off to sleep. It snowed that night. It stopped by the time the Brunch Club woke up, and the sky was sunny and clear, and there wasn't much of a breeze. This wasn't great news for them, as they knew it would be easier for the hill giants to see them approaching. Nevertheless, they proceeded into the hills. Haste was not needed, as they knew they were in the giants' territory now. They walked slowly, scanning every hilltop, valley, rock outcropping, and grove they saw. They did not talk, and were thankful the couple inches of fresh snow muffled their footsteps. In the early afternoon, they saw a small cluster of boulders. They hid behind it, hoping to keep out of sight, and ate lunch. Elora peered over the rocks, scanning the horizon, and when she was confident it was clear, led them back to their path. It was a couple hours after lunch when the first boulder landed 100 feet in front of them. They stopped and crouched down to make themselves smaller targets. 300 to 400 feet to the north-northwest, on top of a tall rocky hill, they saw a gray-skinned giant. He held a boulder above his head, but did not throw it. He put the boulder down when the Brunch Club backed away. They waited a few moments, then moved forward once more. The giant picked up the boulder and threw it. This time it landed closer. They retreated a little ways more. Elora raised her bow. The giant quickly stepped behind one of the large piles of boulders that rested atop the hill. They still couldn't see the giant, but now they knew it could see them. What now? Asked Salas. I only saw one giant, Diesa pointed out. Where's the other? Good question, said Elora. Why isn't it throwing more rocks at us? Drusilla wondered. We're out here in the open. I think it just wants us to stay away, said Vorjan. We could charge it, considered Elora out loud. It has high ground, Vorjan said, and we have no cover. We should set a trap for it, Diesa suggested. What would we use as bait? One of us? Salas asked. Elora reached into her sack. We still have all that jerky we bought for Herrera. That's right, Drusilla confirmed. How much do you have? Vorjan asked. A little less than 40 pounds, Elora said, after adding up the jerky she and Drusilla had bought in Wheaton. A look of disbelief appeared on Diesa's face. You've each been carrying around 20 pounds of jerky this whole time? It was for Herrera, Drusilla said sadly, thinking about their lost wolf pup. I guess it's worth a try, said Salas. They walked back the way they came, hoping the giant would see them leave and think he frightened them off. As soon as they were out of sight, they made camp and rested while they waited for nightfall. At dusk, they walked back to where the boulders landed. They were still there, and they hid behind them for cover. Diesa crouched and snuck forward about 30 feet, testing whether the giant could see her. Nothing happened. She slowly walked back to the boulders and told them it looked safe to set their trap. Elora, Diesa, and Salus fanned out quietly and each constructed a blind made of grass and snow. The blinds and boulders formed a 40-foot wide circle. Elora placed all 40 pounds of jerky in the center of it. Diesa, Elora, and Salus hid behind their snow blinds. Vorjon and Drusilla each hid behind a boulder because their heavy armor made it hard for them to move quietly. They waited and hoped the smell of smoked meat would find its way up the hilltop and tempt the giants. They waited for a very long time. They waited for a long time after that. They saw the snow blow across the ground and the jerky move a bit. This gave them hope that a breeze was picking up and that it would carry the scent up the hill. Before any of them realized the breeze was only located around the jerky, a creature swooped in on large, bat-like leathery wings and landed in front of the bait. The creature was enormous. It was 10 feet long and looked like a lion with dragon wings. On either side of the lion's mane, 2 other heads were attached to its shoulders. On the right side was the neck and head of a red-scaled dragon. On the other side was a great horned goat. It pranced around the jerky. The lion head leaned down to sniff it. The other 2 heads looked around, keeping an eye out for scavengers that might try to claim this prize. Vorjon's lack of night vision meant he could not see what the creature was. He could only make out a monstrous dark shadow against a slightly less dark night sky. When he turned to ask Drusilla what she saw, his shield scraped against the boulder. All 3 heads stared toward him. The red-scaled dragon's eyes narrowed. The unmistakable glow of fire lit the inside of its open mouth. This tale will continue next week in episode 22. Episode 21 was written by Dominic White and based upon a Dungeons & Dragons campaign created by our Dungeon Master, Brian Messmer. Valuable contributions to the story were added by the role-playing of Bethany Powers, who plays Diesa, J.P. Black, who plays Drusilla, Liz Richard, who plays Elora, Anna Flemke, who plays Salus, Dominic White, who plays Vorjon, and Brian Messmer, who plays everyone else. Ambience and effects used with permission by Michael Gelfi. If you enjoyed this podcast, please help us out by sharing it with your friends. We'd appreciate it. More information about Rescued by Dragons and ways to support this podcast can be found at Rescued by Dragons. You can follow us on Instagram at Rescued by Dragons and on Twitter at Rescue Dragons. Thank you for listening, and please join us next week to find out, along with the rest of us, what happens next.